Well, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, good night to wherever anyone may be across the world. Sort of generally do the same intro. And then somebody said, well, it was the middle of my night. You didn't say good night to me. So I don't know. If you're lying in bed somewhere on the other side of the world, hello to you too. But thanks importantly for joining us wherever you are live today for Serverless Office Hours. We're streaming on the AWS Twitch channel, YouTube Serverless Land, and via LinkedIn Live. My name's Julian Wood. I'm a developer advocate for Serverless here at AWS. And I'm super duper happy to have the one and only Alan Helton, who is a AWS Serverless Hero, a prolific blogger, a cloud architect, a podcast host, a newsletter publisher. Alan, I'm sure there's more stuff that you do. Welcome to Office Hours, first of all. How on earth did you get involved with AWS and Serverless in particular?
Well, thank you for that introduction. That was quite the intro.
You're all worth it.
Yeah, appreciate that. So how I got into AWS Serverless, it was at my last job was like 2019, and the company I was working for basically gave me free reign to explore the cloud. I was given a task, go figure out the cloud. It was that vague, and started with an immersion with AWS. One of your, I believe it was a professional service person, came in and started teaching a little bit about serverless and gave us the ropes with Lambda and API gateway and all that. And it was my job at the time to evaluate how quick and easy is it to build on these things and how viable is it for a production application. It was in GovTech, so how viable is it for government software? And so we started building with it. Started deploying a couple of Lambda functions behind the API gateway. And I saw that it took like literally 5 minutes to write a hello world and deploy it into the cloud and actually have it be reached over HTTP. And I was like, holy cow. It was just something that I just didn't, it was unfathomable to me at the time. And took that up to the executives, the powers that be, and said, we have to pursue this. So I got the green light for that, and then just started building production applications with it. We took about a year, like a full year of R&D, of learning cloud concepts, multi-tenancy, NoSQL data modeling, just a whole bunch of modern cloud development. We learned about CI/CD, how we build all that, and then we started building some applications in the cloud. So it was quite a whirlwind. It was a whole bunch of stuff thrown in.
I mean, you literally jumped straight into serverless rather than doing, what other people do is a sort of staged approach of, from EC2 to, something else, and move sort of up the stack. You went straight in.
Yeah. Yep. We went from it was quite the change. It went from on-prem hosted thick client apps to thin client serverless in the cloud. It was about as stark of a contrast as you can get. And I didn't dislike what we were doing before, but as soon as I was exposed to serverless and all that, I was like, oh, okay, well, this is way better. So yeah, it's been a journey. I've been documenting it the whole way, the lessons learned and all that fun stuff.
Well, I mean, you've been doing fantastic documenting stuff, and I did put Alan's details in the chat. But yeah, readysetcloud.io. Amazing blogs. Something I look at all the blogs that have come through over there, and then Alan's Twitter and LinkedIn information as well. We're going to be getting back to lots of info from Alan, but yeah, let's just chat quickly about what's happening in the past week of serverless at AWS. Last week's live stream was with myself and Matthew Grasmick, who is the product manager for Lambda response streaming. So if you're unaware, you can now stream responses from Lambda, speeds up your time to first byte, and you can also do some funky larger payloads. So yes, that was fun. I was doing all the demos and hosting at the same time, so in my head it was slightly chaotic, but we got through all of it, I think, and managed to show all the things without breaking too many of the servers. So that's all good in my book. In terms of what's new, well, Java 17 is out, so Lambda support for Java 17 hotly waited for. We know that some of the runtimes have been a little slow. We are picking up pace. There's a lot of work, I think I've mentioned it before, behind the scenes to be able to improve how quickly we can do the runtimes. So, a lot of that work is done. So we had Python 3.10 out, I think 2 weeks ago, the container image for 3.11. So think of that as the sort of dev, let's check and see that that's all okay. And then Java 17. So obviously snap start with Java for, no cold starts is available for Java 17 as well. So yeah, really, if you're a Java person, this is going to be a massive performance boost, not just the snap start, but also things in Java as well, which will be super useful. Then just 2 others I'm going to pick out, and one's actually another Lambda one is guard duty support for Lambda. That's coming out. So that's another security kind of thing, going to be able to check your Lambda functions for a whole bunch of things. Not many people are necessarily aware of that, so that is super useful. And then actually, bizarrely further down, the EFS, 10 gigs of throughput. So a lot of customers are using EFS with Lambda, and people are going, that's a bit strange. Why on earth would I have an NFS with Lambda? But this is sort of massive parallel Lambda functions working on the same data set. Could be ML models, could be data crunching, all this kind of things. And many people have things that can't just sit in S3. So EFS is a super big file system, and now your Lambda functions can connect to it via a VPC. And 10 gig of throughput, so that just speeds things up, which is always good. Some supporting blog posts for things like Java 17. And then also Josh Kahn has done a really good post on Lambda and VPC lattice. So this is a networking construct that makes VPCs, or I won't say makes VPCs super easy, but it's sort of an overlay for VPCs. So you can connect container applications, EC2 applications, and Lambda applications with this networking construct. And I often say one of the big benefits of serverless is actually the amount of networking you don't have to do. Anyone who's done networking beforehand is like, oh my word, when you've got ports and sockets and firewall rules and all these kind of things. We often talk about the code and the scale up, but I promise you the networking is one of the big hidden benefits of serverless. And this is just another way to do networking and make it even easier. And of course, on the 17th of May, we've got the AWS Serverless Innovation Day. So this is going to be a full day talking about event-driven architectures. It's going to be serverless containers. It's going to be serverless compute. It's going to be step functions, Lambda, Event Bridge, EKS, ECS, Fargate, all those kind of things on the product kind of side. And it's very demo heavy. So this isn't a webinar where a lot of people are going to be blurbing at you with death by PowerPoint. Lots of interesting demos, and it's literally going to be full day. So I think it's sort of 8 hours worth of good, deep technical content across a broad range of things. So register now, sign up, and I'll be involved. The whole team will be involved. Wednesday, May the 17th. Put that in your diary. That's going to be super useful. But today, it's Alan Helton, automating your life with serverless. But please remember, we are live. So the very first one we live is Dave Boyne on my team is live from a bar in Berlin trying to listen. I hope the music isn't too loud. If you're in Berlin, I don't know if it's, is it EDM, electronic dance music? They got the EDA mixed with EDM, maybe, Dave. Sorry, bad joke. But enjoy the beer if you're having a beer in the bar, and hopefully this is useful for you too, Dave. But let us know where you are. We've always got Charles, Allison. Hi, Charles. Thanks for joining us from Nigeria, and other expert AWS people, Zach Jones, Noel. Thanks for joining us as well. So let me know who you are, where you come from, and send us any questions or comments via the chat, and we'd be happy to chat to you. So Alan, over to you. Automating your life with serverless. What does this mean?
It's it sounds super ambitious in general, but quick aside before I go into that. It's funny that you said the networking piece around serverless, about how you don't have to do any of that and manage all that. My college degree is software engineering with a focus on networking.
Wow.
It wasn't a minor, but it was an emphasis on networking. And every day that I don't have to exercise that is a day that I am happy. That was a pretty rough part of
I think
college.
The fundamentals are incredible to know everything about TCP/IP and DNS and all that, and routing and switching and all those kind of things. But the actual setting it up and running it at scale. My infrastructure days haunt me slightly. I know it is super important, but I love how some of it just goes away. But that doesn't mean like VPC constructs you can't use with Lambda. Lambda's awesome with the VPC, but it just means there's a lot of stuff you don't need to do, which is great.
Right. Yes, you don't have to. Doesn't mean you can't. Okay, so automating your life. To get into it, I feel like I need to do a little bit of a backstory and just more or less resume that intro. When I was learning serverless and getting into the cloud, I would search online and try to find helpful articles that basically did what I was trying to do at the time, and couldn't find a whole lot. There was some, serverless has been around for a while. There have been champions and heroes in the area for a while, but I couldn't find exactly what I was doing. So whenever I would tackle that problem, or my team would tackle that problem, I would make sure to write a blog post and post it online, just to make sure that if somebody else was trying to follow in the same tracks, they would be able to hopefully shortcut their learning and do what I did. So I started off on Medium, publishing all my blog posts there, and I started getting really excited about it. I would post a blog, I don't know, every 2-3 weeks, and was trying to figure out how to drive engagement. And I read something one time about Medium where when you publish something there, you don't own your content. You're basically signing it over to Medium. And I didn't quite like that. I liked that my stuff was getting out there, but I didn't like that I didn't own my content. So I decided to move over to my own blog, Ready Set Cloud. I spent probably like 3 weeks trying to come up with that name. But migrated everything over and then started publishing to that. And then I would publish to my blog, which I built on Hugo, and host in Amplify. And when I would post that, I would manually copy the data and the content over and cross-post it onto Medium. So I would canonically link to my blog, and then have a duplicate out there just to Medium. After a while, I started posting it to dev.to. So I'd have 2 places that I was cross-posting. And then after a while, I started doing it on Hashnode as well. I found the 3 blog platforms that everybody was using, so I decided to post it all there to reach as many people as possible. And I see that Robert, yeah, that sounds exactly like something you'd want to automate. And yes, that is exactly what I did, because by the time I got into all that, I was at a pretty standard routine of posting once a week, every Wednesday. I've posted every Wednesday for the past, it's something like 70 Wednesdays.
Wow.
So it was taking a lot of time, because I'll go into it in a minute. I have some content around all that, but I wanted to automate that because I was spending over an hour every Wednesday making sure that stuff got where it needed to go and things were updated appropriately. And I messed up a lot. There would be things where I'd copy and pasted wrong, and just wasted my time week over week, and it was prone to error. So I thought, okay, well, I can probably automate this. All these platforms have APIs, so I can write a Lambda function that calls an API. So I did. And let me bring up some slides here to talk a little bit about Ready Set Cloud, because it's more than a blog. I also have a newsletter that I send out every week as well, and a podcast that I do every other week. It's turned into a pretty big content hub, and I wouldn't be able to do any of it if I didn't automate pretty much everything around it, because it's a lot of work. It would be a lot of work if everything wasn't handled for me automatically. So let me bring this up, and yeah, we'll just go into slideshow mode. So that looks pretty good.
I suppose that also the bigger picture here is lots of people are thinking, well, I don't have a newsletter, I don't have a podcast, I don't necessarily have all these things I need to automate. But the bigger picture is Alan's going to show how much you can do, and maybe this is for your own personal kind of things, but think of this also for your company as well. When the neurons are firing about what you can automate, that yes, we can talk about front-facing APIs, and we can talk about data processing, and all the sort of big heavy lifting things that Lambda can do. But a whole lot of IT automation or business processes that just need to run and update kind of things, Lambda is amazing for that, and connected with event bridging, step functions, all these kind of things. So yeah, think of the bigger picture. This is not, don't get sort of dissuade thinking, oh well, I don't need to cross post onto various platforms. You can do a lot with this, with some of these ideas.
Yeah, exactly. That's really what I want people to take away with what I'm about to show, is that you can't, Lambda and step functions specifically, I go super heavy on step functions. Those enable so much automation and work. It's pretty much my go-to. If there's something that I do more than one time a week, I usually start thinking about, I could probably automate that and just go straight to the workflow studio. So super fast, because I know we're more interested in code than we are everything else, but just want to show Ready Set Cloud has turned into a pretty big thing. And again, it's because of all these automations that I've built that does a lot of things, cross post everywhere, send newsletters, manage podcasts, a whole lot. I also have a fitness app that's pretty cool that I built. So I'm talking about automating your life. I used to be a fitness coach pretty much entirely through college. I worked at a running store, a local run shop, and part of my responsibilities there was training, was coaching. I would coach beginners, and they'd learn how to basically go couch to 5K. How do I get to run and all that? So I built up a lot of experience with fitness and all that stuff. And so that carried on. I don't coach anymore, but I do have some friends that come over to my house a couple times a week, and we work out together. And I work out 5 days a week for whatever, training for the reInvent 5K right now. But one of the things that I was doing literally every day, Monday through Friday, was coming up with a workout to, keep it fresh. I don't want to do the same thing every day. So I thought, well, why don't I hop on the ChatGPT bandwagon and start asking it to generate workouts for me using only what I have available. And so we'll get into that, because that's pretty cool. That has freed up a ton of my time, which is super nice, and has made me more sore than I've been in a long time as well, because of the exercises that it comes up with. But Ready Set Cloud, the website in general, has three major components. It has the piece that's made with Hugo, which is a static site generator. It's all Markdown. The entire website is written in Markdown, and Hugo is written in Go, and it converts that Markdown into HTML. So it is built and run through Amplify. It's triggered whenever I make a push to the main branch. GitHub hosts the UI in S3, fronted by CloudFront, and then I have some backend services that do all the automations behind the scenes. And then I have the API that I use for the newsletter and for the fitness stuff. And then I have a subdomain for the fitness stuff that I just open out there for free. It generates a workout every day that you can hop in and join me as well. That's written in Next.js, a little bit different than the static site, and it's same process. What I try to do is, come up with these automations and repeat the process as much as possible. So you'll see a lot of recurring architectures. It's easier to maintain.
Definitely. I mean, we should probably do a serverless office hours sometime on, maybe it won't be the tech thing, but on the fitness kind of side. We all sit in our chairs for far too long. And yeah, I should have picked your brain when we've met on far more fitness kind of stuff to improve. I'm a little bit of a runner, but yeah, things start creeping and getting old. So you also need all the help you can get.
Yeah, happy to talk about that. I had a very fun marathon career before I had kids.
I heard you. In fact, you've got a ridiculous marathon time, which I'm very, very, very jealous of. Good for you. Well done.
Yeah, a lot of people say that, and then I remind them I spent hundreds of hours and thousands of miles running to get that time. Didn't just wake up and go run a marathon at that speed.
Yeah, that's a funny thing. I have nothing like your time, but I have run a marathon before, and people are like, "Oh, isn't running a marathon a crazy thing to do on the day?" And you're like, the day is just the end of the road. Like, it's literally the months and months of training, and then the day is slightly longer run with a few more people watching. But It's all the training that goes up to it. That's the time-consuming thing. Anyway.
Yes. Yeah, the hardest part about a race day is dealing with all the emotions, nerve, and the nervousness, and then closer to the end, the fighting the give up. See, always hit a wall later in the
Yeah.
stages. But for the automation that I built for the blog, what I wanted it to do was cross post to dev and medium and hash node, and I didn't want to do anything, like literally nothing. I wanted to just push to GitHub, have it appear on my site, and then have it automatically appear on all the other things. And importantly, what I needed it to do was update the canonical URLs whether it's on Medium or hash node or dev. It needed to point back to my site, because if it doesn't, search engine crawlers see the duplicate content and score you lower in rankings. One of the things that you don't have to do, but I wanted to do, A, for a challenge, and B, to provide a nicer experience for my readers, is what I have there on the single origin. I think this was one of the neatest pieces that I did in this automation, was all of my articles on a specific platform link to the articles that live on that specific platform. Meaning, if I post a blog post and it references 5 other articles that I've written in the past, if I'm reading the version on Medium, all 5 of the links that I reference to my writing will go to the Medium articles, the Medium versions. If it's on my website, it goes to the versions on my website. Dev and Hashnode are the same thing, so they don't all go back to my site, and it doesn't matter for rankings and all that, because they all canonically link back to the source. But I really wanted a seamless experience, keep you in the same page and not have a stark difference. And then lastly, scheduling content. This was a relatively recent thing that I did. So one of the things with Hugo and static site generators is you can't do stuff in the future. It has to compile at when you want the content distributed. So if I date something tomorrow and I run the static site generator for today, it wouldn't show up on the website. I would have to retrigger a build on the day that I scheduled it for, and it would go. But I kind of painted myself into a corner on that because of all the cross-posting automations. It wasn't as simple as just trigger a rebuild. There was stuff that I had to take into consideration in order to do that effectively. So I had to build that and architect around all that. And I have here kind of how that all works. So I push an article to GitHub. It triggers a build and Amplify. And Amplify, when it's done, will fire an EventBridge event, which is something that I worked with Michael Liendo to discover. I don't think it was documented at the time, but he dug through the Amplify code for me, found that super nice. So I just
that's the advantage of being a serverless hero right there. Just speak to the other internal super expert on Amplify, Michael Liendo, and he'll look through the Amplify code base and find a little hack for you to use. I love it.
Yes, exactly right. I just sent him an IM that day. I was like, hey, I'm trying to do this, and I don't know if there's an easy way to do it. And he said he didn't know. And literally 5 minutes later, he came back with that. And I was like, awesome. Okay, let's roll.
Brandon, thanks for joining us via Twitch. Yep, cool too.
So that I wrote a rule that triggers a Lambda function, and that Lambda function calls back into GitHub to pull new content. So it knows where to look for blog posts, it knows where to look for newsletters. It's all in a folder structure that it looks at. It parses the new content and looks at the date. If the date is today or in the past, it goes and kicks off a state machine that runs the cross-posting state machine right away, immediately. It's on demand. And then if the date is in the future, and we'll do this here in a little bit, it will fire an EventBridge event that triggers a Lambda function that will create an EventBridge schedule, which is scheduled on the date that I want the post to release. So if I write something that is supposed to go out next Wednesday, that EventBridge schedule, it's a one-time for next Wednesday that will kick off the build. And then it saves some metadata about the post in DynamoDB. It saves the ARN of the schedule because the one-time schedules don't clean up after themselves yet. So there's the flow. Somebody asked, what do I use to create the nice style diagrams? I use Excalidraw. Yeah, so thanks, AJ. Excalidraw for that. Super fast, really nice, free tool, browser based. Highly recommend. I use it for pretty much everything, and it's also what Dave uses for all of his EDA visuals. Super nice. I actually learned about it from him.
There you go. Dave, that
okay,
pint
so
is worth it in your Berlin pub.
Yeah. So this doesn't look as nice as I was hoping it would, but this is the state machine, everything, and I'll high level walk through it. We don't need to go through the entire thing, but the first thing that it does is it does an item potency check, because the last thing I want is for something to fail. This runs again, and my content is posted multiple times on Medium or Dev or wherever. I don't want the duplicate content. I don't want to deal with that. So, one of the pillars of serverless development from AWS is designed for retry. That's why we start with an item potency check. And that item potency key is just the commit hash from GitHub and the file name. So that's what these, let me move my mouse. That's what these DynamoDB calls are up here at the top. I know it's kind of hard to read. I don't think I can zoom in very well.
But you're also just using the native step functions SDK integrations to read and write from Dynamo. I think that's a super powerful thing, especially for idempotency. You've got a state machine, you want to run multiple things idempotently. SDK integrations with Dynamo. I mean, that is just magic.
Yep. So I try to use direct integrations as often as I can. If I don't have to run a Lambda function, I won't. That's my general rule of thumb. So each one of these branches here in this parallel execution is publishing to a different platform. So the left one is for Medium, the right one is for Dev, and this one is for Hashnode. So basically the same architecture, but it's doing slightly different things in the Lambda function that it's calling. It's transforming the markdown that I wrote to the markdown that each one of these things requires. Frustratingly, Dev and Medium and Hashnode all use very slightly different versions of Markdown to render their content. So I have a Lambda function in there that transforms it to how each one of those platforms likes it. Then I have a generic Lambda function. All it does is call an API. So this is a transform, this is the push. So post to all these different things. And then based on whether or not it was a success, we'll save the result into DynamoDB. So yes, it was successfully saved or published to Dev, save that record in Dynamo, so on and so forth. So in the event that maybe 2 of the cross postings work, but 1 fails, I can go in, fix whatever it is, and run the state machine again. And the state machine is smart enough to know I don't need to post to the ones that were successful. And then down here, it goes, saves a metadata record, and then sends me an email that says, hey, you're good to go, which is always nice. I think that's when I was in London last week, I got an email that said it didn't work, which is, I was like, of course I'm not at home and it doesn't work. But I was able to figure it out, but super nice.
Just quickly to dive in, because Zach Jones Noel had said, well, that's a simple state machine. And then I love how step functions. So SF is step functions, because Borgetig, you were asking, what is SF? That is step functions. That's AWS's managed workflow automation service. And if you look at this, some people may go, oh, I can see sort of 3 duplicates and it looks like a big state machine. But the point is, in a normal application, this is going to be all in your code. Literally, your code is going to contain all of this branching logic, if, then, retries, write to Dynamo, read from Dynamo, doing all this kind of thing. It's a lot of stuff you need to code. You can pull all that out and you can run it in step functions and then plug in some Lambda functions where you need to do some custom stuff. As Alan is doing, each destination needs a different rendering of Markdown, so use that. But actually, even this visualization of being able to look at the whole flow of your application rather than having to delve into the code to see how things works is super powerful.
Yeah, and on top of that, when you actually go and look at an execution of the state machine, it does show the path that the code took. You can see there's several different paths in here that you could possibly take based on outcomes of Lambda functions. And when you actually look at an execution, it shows the ones that were executed and versus the ones that were skipped. So you can see
they've done a great job. And then Surab, yes, did you make this diagram manually? It was automatically created. This isn't the inception where you're talking about automating everything. This is in the step functions console. So yeah, this is literally what it looks like. This don't need to generate anything.
Yes, pro tip, if you want the ones that show the direct integrations and what services it's actually calling, you have to export from within Workflow Studio itself. So open up the diagram in Workflow Studio. If you don't, you can get a diagram, but it doesn't. It abstracts away what services are being called. So you have to actually click into it. So yeah, that's the big one. I don't think it's simple, but what's nice about it is that it actually only under the covers is running 2 different Lambda functions to do all of this different work. So these are the same Lambda function. I just pass in different parameters via the workflow. So talked a little bit about the future post. So when the time has come to do a future post, so if I pushed to main today, my post for tomorrow, it would create a schedule. When that schedule elapses, it executes a Lambda function. All that Lambda function does is trigger an amplify build because I need Hugo to regenerate the static content. I could probably use a pipe there. I don't actually know if I could or not, but it then goes through a subsequent flow. So the amplify on success publishes that job status succeed, and then it goes and calls a different step function execution, the one for future posts. And really all it does is it has a little switch statement in here. It loads a post out of Dynamo that says it was scheduled in the future. It says, okay, I'm going to handle this. I'm going to process that. It identifies the type. Is it a newsletter that I scheduled in the future? Is it a post that I scheduled in the future? And then all it does is it just calls the step function that handles and actually does the logic here. Then after it executes that, sends it off into the ether, it does a little bit of cleanup. So it deletes the event bridge schedule, the one-time schedule that's elapsed. We don't need it anymore. And then it also deletes the future record out of DynamoDB. So I don't need a record of posts that were scheduled in the future at one point in time. So this was what I had to do to make that all work. Schedule in the future was not as easy as it sounded when I first started tackling it. So Rand just asked, how did you test it without posting anything? I didn't. I let the people that own the publications I was publishing to know that I was testing an automation and to please forgive me. So I think I sent about four posts when I shouldn't have, to get it actually working in a production ready mode. So I asked for forgiveness, really is the answer on that one.
Cool. Thanks all. Rand Rand's been on the podcast before talking about lots of cool things he's done with Python and well architected. So also have a look on our YouTube Serverless Land channel for Rand Eisenberg's awesome things. Thanks for joining us, Rand.
Okay, so I think that's what I have for the blog, and we'll look. I'll go and do a demo of that here in a minute. But I want to talk about the newsletter. So I send a weekly newsletter. I call it Serverless Picks of the Week, where I comb through a lot of content that people create, not just me, but everybody in the community create about serverless. I find the things that I find particularly interesting, consolidate them, and send that out every Monday. So there were a few things that I had to consider for this. I was using Twitter's newsletter service, Review, but that got shut down. So I had to find something else that was better, because I'm not one to settle for anything less than what I had before. And I actually gave an entire talk on the newsletter, and we can link to that, because that was a fun talk. But I wanted to do more things. I needed to be able to notify sponsors for the newsletter that they needed to send me a new ad to run. I wanted analytics. I needed, of course, to email people. I host all the archive for the newsletter on my website, but the point of a newsletter is to actually send it out via email. So ended up using SendGrid for that. They have a really nice free tier that I haven't outgrown yet, which is really nice. But I had to build all this stuff for it to work. And again, my one driver for this was all I want to do is push it to main. I want to push the archived version of my website version to GitHub and be hands off the entire rest of the process, because I was doing a lot of work week over week and I didn't want to do that anymore. I just wanted to write the content and have it distributed for me. So hopefully this looks like a familiar diagram, because it runs the exact same process behind the scenes. It just looks in a different location in my GitHub repository for newsletters, but it does the exact same thing. Kicks off a different state machine because it does something different, but it runs through the same process. Is it scheduled in the future? We'll create an event bridge schedule for it. If it's not, we'll run the state machine that does that. And hopefully by now we've all seen, I love step functions and state machines. That is how you automate your life, is with step functions. Orchestrate a whole bunch of stuff, build tools once, throw them into a state machine so you can reuse them over and over and over again to give yourself basic utilities. It really accelerates automation as time goes on. So same process as the blog post. Here's the sending a newsletter state machine, what that actually does. So of course, just like last time, just like with a blog post, it does an idempotency check. I don't want to send the newsletter multiple times. So we check to make sure that nothing failed along the way and all that. Figure out who's the sponsor, so I can enrich some content inside of the newsletter. And then I use a Lambda function to actually publish the data into SendGrid. There's a couple of different APIs. One creates the newsletter. It's known as a single send inside of SendGrid. It's a campaign. It's a marketing version versus just sending a normal email. And then this Lambda function, it actually hits the API to say go. And then it updates my records again for idempotency in DynamoDB, and then sends an email to me saying things are good to go. So pretty similar, just different APIs really, which again should be something that we're catching on for this automate your life thing. It's just a bunch of API calls that are orchestrated to make sure it's not doing it twice. The other piece are not event-based. They're more schedule-based for the newsletter. So every Wednesday, I send out an automated reminder to the sponsor for that week that says, hey, can you please get me your ad that you want me to run, because you have 4 days left to get it to me before it sends out. So that goes out automatically. I don't ever have to deal with that. The only thing I interact with that is the response from that has the ad that they want to run. And then every Friday, I said this in my talk about the newsletter. I am, despite everything that we're talking about, I'm actually like ridiculously lazy, and I always forget to go in and check analytics. That's just something that's never on top of my mind. So because I never did, I wrote a state machine that triggers Fridays at 9 a.m. It just does the analytics for me. It hits the SendGrid API, gets me the individual stats for the newsletter that went out that week. And then it also does a couple more data analytics on things that SendGrid doesn't track, like my week over week subscriber counts. And it puts that into an email and sends that in. So I get that delivered to me by me in my mailbox every Friday. So I get to see it. I always check email, so I'm not going to forget to do that. So very nice to have that automated as well. Prior to that, I never knew. People would ask, and I'd be like, I don't know how many subscribers I have. I don't know how it did. I don't know if it's bouncing, but now I do. I could tell you relatively quickly how it's growing and how it's performing. Okay, so the last thing that I want to talk about as far as automation goes is very unrelated to all the content creation. This was still a major part of my life, the fitness app, generating workouts and doing the workouts and making sure that they're available. Oh, nice. I didn't know I animated a slide. That's cool. So people ask why'd you do that? And my answer really is why not? I would spend a decent amount of time early in the morning trying to come up with something fresh. Oftentimes it wasn't fresh. It was something that was just easy for me to do. So getting something generated for me without having to pay for a professional program was a big motivator for me. Just wake up in the morning and have something in my inbox and also on my website that I can follow. Generated new every day is always different. So of course, driven by state machines. What I really like about state machines is that you can schedule them to run at any cron interval that you want. So every Sunday, it goes through and it generates all of the workouts for the week. So I have it set to in the Lambda function that I built that is the generator. I put in all the equipment that I have. I say I have kettlebells, I have dumbbells, I have barbells. So I want to have workouts that incorporate those things. I don't have a cable machine. I don't have all the fancy gym equipment. I'm just working out of my garage. So I want things that only I can do. So I do that and then pass that into ChatGPT. Say, build me a workout that does this. And then I did that for a while, just give me the workout. And then I still found myself every day coming up with a warm up to actually get the muscles going that was relevant to the workout. And then same with the cool down, right? I want to warm up the muscles I'm about to work. So I didn't want to do that anymore. I wanted that automated for me. So I created a Lambda function that I'm actually really proud of that we'll look at it in a minute, but it holds context. You can have a conversation with ChatGPT and it remembers the context. So I can say, create a workout that works out the arms, that uses barbells. And then the second time I call it, I can say, now generate a warm up for that. And the keyword there is for that, right? It remembers the context of the workout that it already generated. It comes up with something appropriate. So it does that every Sundays, every Sunday at 2. And then I get an email that says, here's what you have to look forward to this week. And it just tells me, Monday is arm day, Tuesday is leg day, whatever it is. It randomly chooses it every time. And then Monday through Friday, I get an email from myself that at 6 p.m. every day, that basically all it does is it just pops an item off of DynamoDB and sends me what the actual workout is. So I get an email delivered that says, here's your workout. Okay, let's talk about the Lambda function that I'm actually pretty proud of. It's relatively simple. It uses Memento as a cache to remember the conversation history. If you haven't used the OpenAI API that communicates with ChatGPT, you can pass in an array of messages, basically the entire chat history. So you can give it the context. So you can see in my example up there, your Fit GPT personal trainer who brings the pain, and that kind of tailors how it's going to respond. And then you pass it in the queries. So you can save all that off into a message array and pass that into OpenAI, and it remembers and gets the context from that array.
So it's actually OpenAI that's sort of doing the remembering, because you sort of, it's like going to the next person in the call center and saying, "Oh, tell me what you said all before." Is that what it's doing, or?
It's inferring context from data you're explicitly passing to it.
Okay.
So that's what I'm actually using Memento for. I have a list cache item where all I'm doing is just pushing the question and the answer back into this list. And then whenever I do a subsequent call, I cache everything on a conversation key here. So when I pass the conversation key into the Lambda function, it pulls that out of the cache, gets the full chat history, and then pushes that over to OpenAI so it can infer the context. And the reason I used a cache as opposed to just keeping it in the state machine and floating that around is because of the size limits, the 256K state transition limit. I didn't want to run into that. I've run into it before, and it's a nightmare to resolve after the fact. So I prepared for it early on. So using Memento, I only need to pass in the conversation key, and that's it. The conversation key and the questions that I want to provide, and then it fetches all that data from a remote cache and passes that in. So pretty happy with how that turned out. You can now have an unbounded conversation with ChatGPT where it remembers that full context for you, which I really liked.
So is it doing it in a single well, you said it was doing it multiple invokes of the Lambda function. So what is then triggering the multiple invokes? What's the sort of workflow you starting the first Lambda function and saying, create an arm workout using dumbbells and barbells, but then what's the sort of follow-on questions you're asking? What kind of questions you're asking?
Yeah, let's look at the code. Let's stop looking at presentation and look at what we're all here to see. So if I go into my serverless AI fitness repo, and everything that I have, pretty much everything that I've talked about today is open source. You can go out and look at it and poke around. So if we go and look at my build weekly workouts state machine. So the first time I call this ask ChatGPT Lambda function, I give it the system context where I'm saying you're a fitness trainer, and I give it a query that I built in a previous Lambda function that said, it's a randomly generated workout. Give me an arm workout or a leg workout or whatever based on JavaScript random that uses the equipment that I have. It randomly chooses the equipment. That gets saved off. And then I call the function again, the same function with the same conversation key, and say, create a closing set. I like to close with something like a drop set or something difficult, where I just say, create it for that workout. When I'm passing in that context of the workout that it just created. And I do it again here, where I say, can you generate a calisthenic warm-up for that workout? Where it's just calling it the same function over and over again.
Okay, yeah.
With that key. That was a pretty neat one to do, and that I only call it 3 times. Again, I didn't have to do it this way for this, but part of the reason why I do all this stuff is to challenge myself and learn. It's not just for automating, it's to get exposed to a lot of this stuff. So, I can now use that Lambda function in whatever I want. And kind of on that note, I've rebuilt things like 5 or 6 times with all the automations that I've done. I have others that we didn't talk about today. So I created I call it a serverless toolbox, where it's just very generic Lambda functions that perform a utility, like this ask ChatGPT, right? This is the Lambda function that I was just talking about. It uses Memento to cache the conversation on a conversation key and just goes back and forth talking with ChatGPT. This is the generic sends an API request Lambda function. Since we don't yet have direct HTTP calls in step functions, I just have a generic Lambda function that you can pass in. What's the HTTP method? What's the auth details? What's the body? What are the headers? Just a function that does that. Sending an email. Pretty much every single one of my automations I just talked about results in sending me an email. Yeah. Since I always have that, I have the send email function triggered on a event bridge rule, where the detail type is just published to the default event bus in my account that says send email. it will run that Lambda function and send me an email. It's already configured with whatever it needs to send the email out. The last one, setting the log retention, is really more of a utility function.
Yeah.
It will automatically set all of the Lambda function logs to a configurable retention period. By default, they come in and are set to never expire. So if you have these things forever, you'll be paying them forever.
Yeah.
You don't always need them forever, right? I don't need to see logs from a Lambda function that ran a year ago. I'm not running any production apps, but in my last job, we used this for retention considerations. When we had to keep specific logs for specifically a year. After a year, they needed to go. So we would do that.
And then you may have differences with dev environments or staging environments and production. Production, you may have an audit requirement to keep logs for a long time. And then in your dev environment, you're never going to need a log longer than a day, possibly. So, yeah.
Exactly right.
So these are just sort of utility functions that you can use, between all of your apps, and you are sort of thinking like a sort of proper grown-up developer of, separating out concerns, building these utility functions that you can then, plug into various different applications to do, to do various things. So, good, well-architected practices, Mr. Helton.
Thank you very much. Thank you. As much as I like building, I don't want to build something that I don't have rebuild, to. Yes. So put those in, and then I have them automatically go into SSM parameters, the ARNs and whatnot, so I can reference them in other templates by the SSM parameter value and pull that in, loosely coupled like. So I wanted to show what actually happens when I publish a blog post to my site. So what we're going to do is we're going to take a very quick look at the blog post that I have scheduled for tomorrow. And I'm going to push that, and we're going to look at the schedule that gets generated as a result. So I have here...
So hordes of people are sitting there on ready, set, cloud.io going refresh, expecting it. It shouldn't appear.
Yeah, it's not going to show up. So my blog post tomorrow is called, "Are We Making Lambda Too Hard?" We can talk about my opinions after that's actually published. Hot take alert on that one. But it's done, and I haven't pushed it yet because I wanted to demo today. So in here, I have a specific keyword that I use in my commit messages to trigger the entire workflow. So if I type in blog, the automations that I have specifically look for square bracket, blog, close bracket in order to run the automations. So it's all commit driven. If I publish a blog that I don't want to pass through all the different cross posting mechanisms, I just omit that, and it doesn't go. So I'll commit that, and we'll push and have that be on its merry way to GitHub. Now, if we remember, the very first thing that it does is Amplify will pick that up and start building. It'll run my Hugo build. Here we go. So if we go to Amplify, you can see that the Ready Set Cloud app is running. And I'm going to go ahead and I don't think we're actually going to run any step functions, but here, let me do this. I'm going to go to step functions, and there is a state machine in here called cross post state machine. This one. So I just want to prove that this isn't going to run because I scheduled it in the future. So I have this in here. This is the one that actually runs and does the fun thing. And so while we wait for the build to finish and amplify, let me just show you what an execution looks like, because I had mentioned that when you actually look at an execution, it shows you the steps that ran. There's a whole bunch of steps in there, but the green ones show you specifically which ones actually ran. And this was a rerun attempt triggered by me because when I was in London last week, the one for dev broke. It didn't cross post successfully. So I had to fix, I actually had a bug in the code that I had to fix. I fixed it, and then I reran this. And then you can see that it transformed it, it published and updated the Dynamo entries. And you can see over here on the right, the ones that were successful, that were successfully published the first time that it ran, it skipped all that. So it checks to see, do I have a successful run for medium? Yes. Okay, abort. And the same thing with hash nodes. So it did all that. Okay. We go back here. So this has taken a while because at this point, Ready Set Cloud's pretty big. It has, 150 blog posts or whatever it is, and all the newsletters that are archived on there and the podcasts that are on there. Plus, it also has a relatively decent sized service behind it that does all this stuff. So it's going and running, building all that.
But actually, this is rebuilding, but it's not actually going to then. Ultimately, is it actually doing anything to publish anything new to the site, or it's just because the amplifier is kicking off the Hugo build, but there's no new content, or what would actually be updated? Yeah.
There is new content technically, but because it's dated in the future, it's not going to render on the website. So Hugo is actually going to skip the stuff that was dated in the future and not render it. So when that's done building, it's going to be essentially a no-op. Yeah. It's running because it picked up that there was a change on the main branch in GitHub, but it's not actually going to result in anything. So whenever that's done, we'll go into DynamoDB and take a look at the scheduled posts in the future. So if we go to Ready Set Cloud,
just to let you know, Alan, we do have literally just about a minute, so we'll hopefully the demo gods are working. But even if it doesn't get there, I think people can get what's happening. Will
as it goes. Then what I'll probably do is open up EventBridge real quick, and we'll take a look at the schedules. Hopefully, that is the first thing that runs. But so nothing in there. If time runs out, then that is unfortunate. I should have kicked this off much sooner.
But then basically, so the amplifier, when that does finish, that's going to then generate that Michael Yendo super cool hack of the EventBridge scheduler rule. And then that's just going to publish that in the future as for tomorrow.
Exactly. And I had to do nothing, right? You saw all I had to do was push to that main branch. And tomorrow morning at, I think it's set to publish at 7 a.m. It's going to automatically cross post it's going to rebuild my website. When that's done, it will then go and cross post everywhere that it goes. I don't have to do anything. I am done for this week as far as blogs go. Cool.
Alan, that is fantastic. I love all the automation. There've been loads of links that have been going on in, that I've posted as well to helpful, lots of super information. Yeah, so thank you very much. Just before we say goodbye to Alan, don't forget Serverless Innovation Day 2023, May the 17th, 8 hours of super duper technical content. And also remember, Serverless Land, slightly different from ReadySetCloud.io, but Serverless Land, lots of information on serverless topics from AWS on serverlessland.com. But Alan, thanks so much for spending time with us today. You have been an awesome person to generate so much information and to be blogging what I think you said sort of 70 times in a row. So AJ Stivenberg said it even better than I did. Thanks, AJ, for joining us. Your consistency and content quality is unparalleled in the serverless community. Tell us your secret. So Alan, thanks so much for joining us. Alan's actually going to be back in a few weeks' time when he's going to be talking a bit more work-wise with Memento Cache. Had a sneak peek today. But yeah, thanks, Alan, for joining us. You'll also see the sneak peek of the blog post tomorrow, so that'll be super useful to see. Thanks, Alan, for spending time with us, and until next time.
Yep. Thank you. Thanks for having me.